Great games to table. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is Nikos RPG's Game Master's Guide. And today we're going to be talking about all things random. Well, no, all things encounters. Well, no, we're going to talk about random encounters, shall we? We're also going to, in particular, talk about what it means to put together a scene and how to differentiate one scene from another in terms of content, what you want to present in terms of not confusing your players. Before we get into that, make sure you go down below and strike all the buttons and let the algorithm know that you're part of our audience. And let's get started.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game.
You've heard me talk before about the various ways you can have your players engage with the environment and how you can get them to engage with your non-player characters. Well, today we're going to be talking about those situations that are sort of imposed upon them by the plans that you have for the game sessions. Some of them are actually not random at all. They're exactly what you're intending to do. But other times it's a matter of opportunity meets preparedness and having everything ready for that encounter when you get to that point. And we're going to be talking in particular about some key encounter types that you may not have considered, that you may want to include, that kind of help to moderate and monitor the players' feelings about the game sessions and how to make sure that you're getting the most out of every session with your players. And the first one of these is simply when players meet and engage with people just being people. It is so strange sometimes when you are utilizing the old classic methodology for handling random encounters, and that is to have a table of encounters. And to my mind, the idea of anything being random within the framework of you being the storyteller really is just a matter of you not having preparation for what you want to have occur in the session. Sometimes this can happen because the story has gone off the rails, so to speak, and the players are headed in directions that you never anticipated. But a lot of the time, people being people is just that. You're traveling through a farmland, so you really don't need to roll randomly for who might be there. There's an odds on favorite being a farmer. The idea is that it's off-putting sometimes when you're utilizing a random table and there's something on that list that makes no sense. I remember there was a random encounter for a woodlands area, and it said the random effect was circus performers. And while it is a really bad it's a really bad Princess Bride reference to talk about the poor circus performers who have lost their way. But the intention of the players, of the people that the players run into being where they are, really makes more sense if you let the people be people. Yes, maybe they are a caravan, but that simply could have been when they got lost in a rainstorm 2 nights ago and hasn't found its way back to the main road. The idea here is that you want the encounters to feel as natural and as comfortable as being in the player's actual neighborhood, because the encounters are in the world where the NPCs where the NPCs and the players live. So you might as well make it as natural and as normal as possible. And now these can be very profitable for the games group from the standpoint if this is a conversation with individuals in an area, for example, that the nobles are thought to be doing something nefarious. Just talking to people who are in the regular day-by-day jobs as a much better likelihood of them spilling the beans and sharing information with your players than it is when you go into a place where they might be pressured or manipulated more openly. These ideas of people being people also refers to what your breakdown is. The idea of running into a group of farmers who happen to have 2 or 3 moderately leveled beings with them that will give the players a run for their money doesn't really make sense. So it like changes the way the dynamics of players into their environment react, because they may have different perceptions if they are constantly met with adversarial forces of equal or greater value. So don't necessarily think these encounters have to be conflict related. They can simply be informational transaction, or even not that. It may be the players decide to avoid the local farmers and not cause them any grief. It may actually serve them better in the long term. Who knows? Okay, so the second thing is that when we are running adventures and you have determined that you're going to be using a random die roll to determine when something happened, doesn't mean that you necessarily have to use that random number to determine what happened. You can actually plan out your encounters in advance and utilize the rolling mechanism to specify when it happens, so that you can actually roleplay a little bit more of the persona that you intended the players to interact with perhaps a little bit more direct personality. For example, perhaps they are now ahead of schedule, so the conversation can be perhaps a little bit more halted, more confused, more revealing. And all of these add the nuance of realism to the encounters, so that your players feel like it's more of the world that they live in, not just a two-dimensional cutout that they're interacting with. This idea also allows you to moderate the amount of time that you expend on an encounter. If you intended for an encounter to be a rather large and complex one, a random encounter that'll give you an opportunity to kick them off and start them in that direction really helps to provide impetus for the intensity that you hold for the adventure, so that the players don't feel the contrivance when you have to artificially put pressure on them later in the scene. Now this one's kind of fun, and generally speaking, these are for those people that really like the slice of life. These are the great ways to carry off a slice of life encounter, by having the players have to deal with a traveler who's had a wheel break on his wagon, or perhaps he's a crate of his chickens has broken loose and now he's chasing chickens around. That could be a fun little engagement, little encounter. Perhaps a person has had a little bit too much of the wacky weed and is tripping balls, as they would say. Maybe it's time to provide them with a lighthearted pursuit of bringing somebody down off of a psychological ledge to help them get the story going where they want it to go. This is all options that you can have when you have these peculiar challenges. It could be more complex. It could be a woman banging around in her house because she can't find her Sunday hat, and she's got to get ready to go to her religious services, and she can't find something, and so therefore she's just making a whole hullabaloo. And these little things add a bit of humor, perhaps a little bit of realism to an encounter series that might have been a little too serious or a little too intense. And this way it lets you to sort of release the pressure valve, so to speak, and get the story going where you need it to go, and to again monitor and moderate the intensity of the sessions minute by minute to make the game more fun for your players. Now, one of the types of encounters that my players have gotten used to and are really thrilled with getting involved with are the library excursions. And that's my fancy way of saying they want or need to get additional information that perhaps their persona might be able to know, whereas they as characters don't, and therefore it gives you a chance to play a little bit of Dorothy behind the scenes and give them additional information not on the books, so to speak, or rather out of the books specifically, so that they can have the information that their persona should have, even if they as a person haven't thought of ways to get to that information. taking him to the local library and allowing for some limited exposition on basically on demand, you're able to give information that otherwise it would feel like you were quote cheating the player out of. And in this way he can actually have the interaction and can ask additional information and gather information from the libraries. I will do a later episode if you guys want me to, about how I handle particular libraries in particular, because it is a true section of the world of Nikos that the data has been recorded for so long that parallels and connections can be made within a player's group compared to the entire story, iteration after iteration, because somebody has already been there and done much of what the players are attempting to do, and therefore it's a win-win for them to gain the information and you get a chance to show off a little bit about the world that maybe the players hadn't pursued intentionally before. Of course, when you're talking about being in an adventure world and there being all these fantastical creatures and beasts and monsters, it's sometimes fun to actually set up an intentional hunting expedition. And by that I mean the players can go, for example, through a library excursion, know that if they want to make a bag of holding or have one made for them, then they have to collect the resources, which includes perhaps the skin of a displacer beast, and so therefore they have to figure out the local denizens, how close they are, what kind of environment they can use for determining that they are indeed in the right area, and even tracking mechanisms and such, allowing the players to intentionally hunt, whether it be an individual to ask questions or a creature to reap the bounty from. Either way, the idea of the intentionally pursuit-minded adventure itself is a fun way to go. And by setting it up in the narrative beforehand, you give the players the opportunity to actually go on one of these types of expeditions. And of course, that brings with it its own unique encounter flavor and oppositional styles. And we talked a little bit earlier about the random encounter with the traveling performer, but realize that the traveling performer can include a wide array of possibilities. It doesn't necessarily mean a minstrel. Perhaps it's a pilgrim who's now going to try to evangelize the players. Perhaps it's a merchant who's got his wares robbed from him, and so now he's listless and wants to go get his stuff, and so therefore he's going to be trying to lure the players into helping him with this. The idea of the traveling performer really is that he gives you a chance to showcase some of your role play expertise by either trying to convince the players of something or to guide them to make decisions that they may not have considered otherwise. Traveling performers sort of are a way to give license for the players to let down their hair and consider something they hadn't before, perhaps even becoming performers themselves. Ultimately, the one kind of encounter that is the best for the game environment, but not necessarily one that's easy to define, is what I call the decomplexifiers. So, for example, if the players have been in pursuit of a villain for several months, but they haven't been able to get a sight on him or even know that he's still out there, they can be beginning to lose heart. And a decomplexifier is something that reinvigorates them, provides them with clarity. It gets rid of some of the brain fog they might have had over what they're not, when they're not even sure what they're doing anymore. Give them a scene that reminds them what they're looking for. So, for example, if they are hunting a person who is known to be a criminal and who has done heinous things in the past, give a refresher course on a local instantaneously so the players will feel how intensely close they are to the villain and will perhaps push on in the story so that you can get to your conclusion as you intended, rather than having the players drag it out because of their own self-doubt or perhaps even confusion about why they are in particular pursuing this encounter course. By having a general term like decomplexifier means you can be a random encounter with an NPC who provides them information, or it might be a specific place they have to search through that will give them clues that help to drive the story forward. But the idea of the decomplexifier fundamentally in the role of a random encounter is a way to fix something if it's broken, and to undo the confusion if it's not, and keep the players moving in the direction they really need to for your adventure to reach its final fruition. Alrighty, so ultimately the ends justify the means is a way of saying what is going to make your game go better. If you are in a situation where your players are already confused, think about that when you're building out your next encounter with them, to make sure that you're not adding to the burden, you're not increasing their stresses, but you're finding ways to feed into the rhythm of the game, whether it be a rising action or a falling action, or simply something that needed to be resolved that you hadn't considered before. By giving it as a random encounter, it diffuses the situation somewhat and lets the players sort of feel like they are once again in the driver's seat, and that they have the agency that they really want and really need to be able to keep playing in your game. I want to thank you for being here for this episode. As always, check out our other playlists at Nikos RPG on YouTube, and if you want to become a part of our community, check out patreon.com/Nikos. We are here Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. generally speaking, and I want to make sure that you remember what my grandfather always told me: we've done enough work, now go play.